Hi, my name is Adam, 27M. My fiancée, let's call her Laura, 26F, and I were supposed to be the perfect couple, or so I thought. I never imagined I'd be writing something like this, sharing my private disaster with strangers online. But here I am. I've seen people post on Reddit and TikTok about situations like mine, and I thought maybe putting this out there could help me figure out my next move. For context, Laura and I met during her freshman year of college. We lived in the same dorm building and eventually hit it off. As fate would have it, we realized we grew up only 2 towns apart, so when it came to heading home for breaks, I started offering her rides. It wasn't a big deal, just a quick 20-minute detour. Those drives turned into deeper conversations, which turned into hanging out more, and before long, we were dating. Our families even meshed seamlessly, and it felt like we were setting up the foundation for a lifetime together. By the time I graduated, I landed a great job back in our hometown. I visited her on campus whenever I could, and when she graduated, she moved in with me. It was perfect, or at least I thought it was. After living together for 3 years, I proposed, and she said yes. We'd been planning our wedding ever since, and everything felt like it was falling into place. Except, I was about to find out that it wasn't. Not at all. In hindsight, there were signs I missed. Little things that, at the time, I brushed off. For instance, my dad, Ben, 52M, started calling Laura more than I thought was necessary. They always said it was about family parties or plans for my mom's, Rita, 50F, birthday, but it still felt a little off. One time, Laura's phone rang while she was in the shower, and I noticed it was my dad calling. When I answered, the way his voice immediately tensed up before making some lame excuse, it left me feeling weird. But I told myself I was overthinking it. My dad had always been the type to make people feel welcome. I chalked it up to that. Then came that day. The day my life flipped on its head. It was a Thursday. Laura was off work and had made breakfast for us before I left. She kissed me on the cheek and told me to have a great day. I smiled, thinking how lucky I was, and headed out the door. But halfway to work, I realized I'd left some paperwork at home, documents I needed for a meeting that afternoon. I decided I'd swing by at lunch to grab them. Laura had been texting me throughout the morning, and everything seemed normal, casual, loving messages like, "What do you want for dinner tonight?" Or, "I did the laundry. Want me to hang your shirts?" I didn't think it was necessary to tell her I was coming home. When I pulled into our apartment parking lot during lunch, I noticed a car that looked an awful lot like my dad's parked outside. My stomach did a little flip, but again, I brushed it off. He could have been stopping by for something. I didn't want to jump to conclusions, but as I climbed the stairs to our door, a sense of unease started creeping up on me. I opened the door, and that's when it hit me. There was a trail of clothes leading down the hallway. A shirt, a bra, pants. The sounds, faint moans, low and unmistakable, were coming from our bedroom. I froze in the doorway, disbelief crashing over me like a tidal wave. My mind was racing, my heart pounding so loudly I thought it might drown out the sounds entirely. But I didn't move. I couldn't. I don't know how long I stood there, paralyzed, but eventually, something in me clicked. I took out my phone and hit record. I picked up the clothes strewn across the floor and threw them into the hallway outside the apartment. Then, camera in hand, I walked toward the bedroom. The door was ajar, so I pushed it open, and there they were. My fiancée, Laura, and my father, Ben, tangled together on our bed. Laura screamed, scrambling to cover herself, while my dad's face went pale as he stammered something incoherent. I just stood there, recording, letting the image burn itself into my memory. When my dad finally got up, fumbling to grab a towel, he tried to approach me, saying, "Adam, let me explain." But I cut him off. "If you don't want to get hurt, don't come any closer," I warned. He didn't listen, reaching for my phone to stop me from recording, and I snapped. I hit him square in the jaw. He stumbled back, slamming into the doorframe and sliding to the floor, dazed. I turned the camera on Laura. "Concerned about him?" I spat. "Funny, you don't seem to have anything to say to your fiancé." She just sat there, clutching the sheet to her chest, her face a mask of guilt and fear. I told them both. "I came home to grab some papers. I'm leaving now, But if either of you are still here when I get back, I'll send this video to everyone you know. Get out. With that, I walked out, leaving them stunned in my wake. I sat in my car, shaking with rage and heartbreak. My phone buzzed with a call from my boss, asking where I was. Somehow, I pulled myself together enough to say I'd be back soon, but inside, I was crumbling. When I got back to work, my boss noticed the blood on my collar. "Are you okay?" she asked, concerned. I showed her the video. Her face twisted in shock and disgust as she watched it, but all I could feel was numb. This was my life now. That night, I came home to an empty apartment, and for the first time in years, I was truly alone. The apartment was eerily silent that night. The air felt heavier, like the walls themselves were mocking me for being so blind. I stood in the doorway for a long time, staring at the empty space where everything I thought I knew had unraveled. Laura's things were still here, her hairbrush on the counter, her favorite blanket on the couch, the stupid throw pillows she insisted on buying that I always thought were pointless. But she wasn't here, and thank God for that. I didn't eat, didn't sleep. I just sat on the couch, replaying the events in my head like a broken record. Every moment of our relationship suddenly felt like a lie. How long had this been going on? Was it just my dad, or were there others? The questions circled endlessly, and I had no answers. All I knew was that I had to tell my mom. The next morning, I tried calling her. She didn't answer. At first, I figured she was busy, but after the 10th call went straight to voicemail, I knew something was off. I had to see her face to face. She deserved to know what kind of man she was married to, even if it meant ripping my family apart. I drove to my parents' house, rehearsing what I'd say. My stomach churned with anxiety, and I had to pull over twice to throw up. How do you tell your mom her husband is screwing your fiancé? There's no guidebook for this kind of thing. When I pulled into the driveway, I saw her standing at the door, arms crossed. She didn't look happy to see me. "Adam," she said sharply, her voice full of venom, "how dare you show up here after what you did?" "What I did?" I asked, confused. She stepped closer, jabbing a finger at me. "Yes, what you did. Your father told me everything. He said you attacked him. Laura's been calling me, crying about how you've been violent with her, too. She's terrified of you." I stood there, stunned. My dad and Laura had gotten to her first, spinning some bullshit story to cover their tracks. "Mom, that's not what happened," I said, my voice trembling. "You need to hear me out." "Hear you out," she snapped. "You hit your father for no reason, and now you're trying to play the victim? You need help, Adam. Serious help. I don't know what's gotten into you, but Laura deserves better." Her words hit like a slap. I couldn't believe it. My own mother was defending them. I felt something snap inside me, and the floodgates opened. "Do you want to know why I hit him, Mom?" I said, my voice shaking with rage. "Because I walked into my apartment yesterday and found him in bed with Laura. That's right, your husband and my fiancé have been screwing behind my back. I have the video to prove it. So don't you dare stand there and tell me I'm the problem." Her face paled, the color draining so fast I thought she might faint. What are you talking about?" she whispered. I pulled out my phone, opened the video, and hit play. She watched in silence, her hands trembling as she clutched the edge of the doorway for support. She didn't even finish it. She stopped the video as soon as I turned on the lights and they realized I was there. I didn't know," she stammered, her voice barely above a whisper. "Yeah, well, now you do," I said coldly. "And you can tell your husband he's dead to me. I want nothing to do with him, or with you if you're going to keep defending him. You picked the wrong side, Mom." She tried to say something, but I didn't give her the chance. I turned and walked back to my car, ignoring the tears streaming down her face. I didn't care anymore. The woman who raised me, who I thought would always have my back, had turned on me the second someone else fed her a story. She could cry all she wanted, but I was done. When I got home, I started packing Laura's things into boxes. Every trace of her had to go. The pictures on the walls, the clothes in the closet, even the toothbrush in the bathroom. I threw it all into boxes and left them by the door. I texted her parents, explaining what had happened and asking them to come pick up her things. I kept it short and didn't bother with details. Her parents didn't respond immediately, but later that night, her dad called me. He was furious, not at me, but at her. He apologized profusely, saying he couldn't believe she would do something so awful. He promised to come by the next day to get her stuff, and told me to block her number if I hadn't already. Don't worry, I said. I've blocked her, my dad, and everyone else who sided with them. I'm done with all of them. For the first time that day, I felt a sliver of relief. At least someone was on my side. I spent the rest of the night deep cleaning the apartment, scrubbing every surface until my hands were raw. It was pointless, but it made me feel like I had some semblance of control. When I finally crawled into bed, exhaustion hit me like a freight train. But sleep didn't come easily. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw their faces, Laura's look of shock when I caught her, my dad's smug expression in the video, my mom's tears when she realized the truth. It was like a nightmare I couldn't escape. I knew one thing for sure. This wasn't over. Not by a long shot. The next morning, I woke up feeling like I'd been hit by a truck. My body ached, my head throbbed, and my chest felt hollow. I hadn't even been able to sleep in our bed. I crashed on the couch because the thought of lying where they had been made my skin crawl. Laura's parents came by around noon. Her dad, Greg, didn't mince words when he walked through the door. "She's a disgrace," he said, shaking his head. "I raised her better than this." Her mom, Diane, was quieter, her face a mixture of sadness and embarrassment. They packed up Laura's things without much conversation. Before they left, Greg looked at me and said, "If there's anything you need, you let us know." "I'm so sorry, Adam. I wish I could change what happened." I nodded, appreciating his sincerity. "Thank you," I said, "but I think I just need time." After they left, I felt an overwhelming urge to do something, anything, to distract myself. I couldn't sit in that apartment anymore, surrounded by memories of a life that had been blown to pieces. So, I got in my car and started driving with no destination in mind. I ended up at the gym, of all places. I hadn't worked out in months, but the thought of punching something sounded therapeutic. I hit the heavy bag until my knuckles were raw, pouring every ounce of anger and frustration into each swing. By the time I left, I was drenched in sweat and emotionally drained, but it felt good. It felt like I was clawing back a piece of myself. When I got home, there was a voicemail from my mom. I debated whether to listen to it. Part of me didn't want to hear anything she had to say, but curiosity got the better of me. Her voice was shaky, like she'd been crying. "Adam, it's Mom. I don't even know where to start. I'm so sorry for how I treated you. I didn't know, and I should have believed you. I've thrown your father out of the house. He's staying at a hotel, and I don't want him back. Please, can we talk? I don't want to lose you." I deleted the message without responding. Maybe one day I'd be ready to hear her out, but not now. Right now, I needed to focus on myself. A few days later, I started looking for a new place to live. There was no way I could stay in that apartment. It felt tainted. A friend of mine put me in touch with a real estate agent, and within a week, I'd found a small cabin on the outskirts of town. It was a fixer-upper, but it was quiet, isolated, and exactly what I needed. Moving out felt like closing a chapter. I left behind the bed, the couch, and anything else that reminded me of Laura or my family. I bought new furniture, new dishes, even new towels. It was like starting from scratch, and while it was exhausting, it also felt liberating. I spent my first night in the cabin sitting on the back porch, staring at the stars and sipping a cheap beer. For the first time in weeks, I felt a tiny flicker of peace. It wasn't much, but it was something. Of course, the universe wasn't going to let me have that peace for long. The next morning, my phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. It was Laura. "Adam, please. Can we talk? I need to explain." I stared at the message, my hands shaking with a mix of anger and disgust. I wanted to tell her to go to hell, to block her number and pretend she didn't exist. But part of me wanted answers. I needed to know why. "So," I replied, "fine. Meet me at the park on Cedar Street at 5 p.m. Don't be late." When she showed up, she looked different. She was wearing the same casual clothes she always did, but she looked smaller somehow, like the guilt had physically shrunk her. She sat down on the bench across from me, her eyes red and puffy. Adam, she started, her voice trembling. I don't even know where to begin. How about the truth? I said coldly. That would be a good place to start. She took a deep breath, avoiding my gaze. It just happened. I didn't mean for it to, but your dad, he was so kind, so supportive. And you were always so busy with work and— Stop, I said, cutting her off. Do not sit here and try to blame this on me. You cheated, Laura, with my father. There's no excuse for that. She started crying, and for a moment, I felt nothing but contempt. Then, as I watched her fall apart, something shifted. The anger didn't go away, but it was joined by something else, pity. She wasn't the person I thought she was, but she was still human, still broken in her own way. I can't forgive you, I said finally. I don't think I ever will. But I hope you figure out whatever it is that's wrong with you, because if you don't, you're going to ruin every relationship you ever have. She looked up at me, her face streaked with tears. I'm sorry, she whispered. I know, I said, standing up, but it's not enough. I walked away without looking back. After walking away from Laura in the park, I felt an odd mixture of relief and emptiness. For the first time, I'd faced her and said exactly what I needed to say. It didn't fix anything, didn't erase what she'd done, but it gave me a sense of closure. Still, it wasn't the end of the mess. That evening, I got a text from my mom. Adam, I need to see you. Please. It's important. I debated ignoring her. I hadn't spoken to her since the day I confronted her at her house, but something told me to hear her out. So, I replied, telling her to meet me at a coffee shop downtown the next day. When I walked in, she was already there, sitting in the corner with a cup of tea in front of her. She looked tired, like she hadn't slept in days. Her eyes lit up when she saw me, but I didn't smile back. I wasn't ready to let my guard down. Adam, she said softly as I sat down. Thank you for meeting me. I didn't say anything, just nodded for her to continue. I've been thinking about what you said, she began, her voice shaky, about how I defended your father without even hearing your side. You were right, I failed you, and I'll never forgive myself for that. I crossed my arms, still skeptical. What do you want from me, Mom? I want to make things right, she said, tears welling up in her eyes. I've kicked your father out of the house. I've spoken to a lawyer about filing for divorce. I want to be there for you, if you'll let me. I leaned back in my chair, studying her. She looked genuinely remorseful, but I wasn't ready to let her off the hook. Why didn't you believe me, Mom? I asked, my voice heavy with emotion. I'm your son. You should have had my back. She wiped at her eyes with a napkin. I don't know, she admitted. Your father. He's always been so good at twisting things, at making me believe him. I was blinded by my loyalty to him, and I'm so sorry for that. You didn't deserve it. I sighed, the weight of her words sinking in. I don't know if I can forgive you, I said honestly. Not yet, anyway. I understand, she said, nodding. Take all the time you need. I just want you to know I'm here whenever you're ready. We sat in silence for a while after that, sipping our drinks and avoiding eye contact. When we finally parted ways, I felt a flicker of hope that maybe, just maybe, my relationship with my mom could be salvaged. But it would take time. The next bombshell dropped a week later. I was settling into my new place, unpacking boxes, and trying to distract myself with the monotony of organizing, when my phone buzzed. It was a text from my mom. We need to talk. It's urgent. My stomach twisted. I had no idea what it could be, but I called her immediately. She answered on the first ring, her voice trembling. Adam, I just found out something, and you need to hear it from me before anyone else tells you. What is it? I asked, my chest tightening. It's Laura, she said. She's pregnant. Her words hit me like a freight train. For a moment, I couldn't speak. What? I finally managed to choke out. She showed up at the house yesterday. My mom continued, her voice breaking. She told me she's pregnant, but didn't know whether the baby was yours or your father's. She wanted me to tell you because she was too scared to face you herself. I sat down on the edge of the couch, my head spinning. This couldn't be real. It was like a bad soap opera, and I was trapped in the starring role. "You've got to be kidding me," I muttered. "I wish I were," my mom said. "I don't know what to say, Adam. I'm so sorry." I ended the call without saying goodbye. My mind was a whirlwind of emotions: rage, disbelief, humiliation. I wanted to scream, to punch something, to wake up and realize this was all just a horrible dream. Instead, I did the only thing I could think of. I grabbed my phone and called Laura. She answered on the second ring, her voice hesitant. "Adam, are you pregnant?" I demanded, skipping the pleasantries. There was a long pause. "Yes," she said finally, her voice barely above a whisper. "Is it mine?" I asked, though I already knew the answer wouldn't satisfy me. "I don't know," she admitted. "It could be yours or your dad's." Her words felt like a knife to the gut. I clenched my fist, struggling to keep my composure. "You are going to get a paternity test," I said through gritted teeth. "And until I know for sure, I don't want to hear from you. Do you understand me?" She started to cry, but I didn't care. I hung up, my hands shaking as I set the phone down. This wasn't just betrayal anymore. It was chaos, and I was stuck in the middle of it. The days that followed were a blur of anger and helplessness. Every time I thought I'd hit rock bottom, the situation found a way to dig me deeper. Laura being pregnant, and the possibility that the baby could be my father's, was like a dark cloud hanging over me. It was inescapable, suffocating. I threw myself into work, hoping to distract myself. But no matter how much I tried to focus, my mind kept circling back to the mess my life had become. My coworkers noticed something was off, especially my boss, Carol, the one who'd seen the video the day everything fell apart. She called me into her office one afternoon, shutting the door behind me. "Adam," she said, leaning on her desk, "you've been walking around here like a ghost. Are you sure you're okay?" I hesitated, unsure how much to share. "It's just personal stuff," I muttered. She gave me a sympathetic look. "I know you're going through a lot. If you need time off, take it. Seriously, you can't keep carrying all this weight on your own." Her words struck a chord. I'd been trying so hard to keep everything together, to pretend like I was fine, but the truth was, I wasn't. I nodded. "Maybe I'll take a day or two," I said. She smiled. "Good. And Adam? If you ever need to talk, I'm here." I thanked her and left her office, feeling a little lighter. But the relief didn't last long. That evening, I got a call from my mom. I almost didn't answer, but curiosity won out. "Adam," she said as soon as I picked up, "I need to tell you something." "What now?" I asked, my voice dripping with exhaustion. "I talked to your father," she said, and my blood ran cold. "Why the hell would you do that?" I snapped. "Because he wanted to explain himself," she said quickly, like she'd been rehearsing her response. "I don't expect you to forgive him, but I thought you deserved to know what he said." I sighed, pinching the bridge of my nose. "Fine. What did he say?" She hesitated, and I could hear the emotion in her voice. "He admitted everything, Adam. He said it started months ago, after one of the family parties. He told me Laura had been confiding in him about your relationship, saying she felt neglected. And he took advantage of that." I felt my hands clench into fists. Took advantage? He's a grown man. He knew exactly what he was doing. "I know," she said, her voice breaking, "and I told him that. I told him he destroyed this family, and I'll never forgive him for it. But he kept saying he regrets it, that he didn't mean for it to go this far." I laughed bitterly. "Didn't mean for it to go this far? Mom, he slept with my fiancée. Multiple times. Now she's pregnant, and we don't even know whose baby it is. What the hell did he think was going to happen?" She didn't have an answer for that, and I didn't wait for one. "I don't care what he regrets," I said coldly. "He's dead to me. Don't ever bring him up again." "Adam." I hung up before she could finish. The next morning, I woke up to another text from Laura. "I'm going to schedule the paternity test," she wrote. "I'll let you know when I have an appointment." I stared at the message for a long time, debating whether to respond. Eventually, I typed back, "Good," and left it at that. But the damage was already done. The idea of her carrying my father's child was a nightmare I couldn't shake. It consumed me, haunting every quiet moment. I didn't know how I was supposed to move forward, how I was supposed to build a life with this kind of shadow looming over me. I started seeing my therapist twice a week instead of once. It was the only place I felt like I could truly vent without being judged. She encouraged me to focus on what I could control, my job, my new home, my hobbies. But it all felt hollow. The one bright spot in my life was the cabin. I spent hours working on it, painting the walls, fixing the creaky floors, and making it my own. It was therapeutic in a way, giving me something tangible to pour my energy into. One evening, as I was sanding down an old table I'd found at a thrift store, my phone buzzed with a notification. It was an email from the lab where Laura had scheduled the paternity test. The appointment was set for the following week. I stared at the screen, my stomach churning. This was it. The moment of truth was coming, and I had no idea if I was ready for it. The week leading up to the paternity test was excruciating. I spent most of my time in a fog, alternating between anger and a deep, gnawing sadness. Every time I tried to distract myself, my thoughts dragged me back to the same question. What if it's his? The night before the appointment, I didn't sleep. I sat on the back porch of the cabin, staring into the woods and sipping whiskey straight from the bottle. It didn't dull the ache in my chest, but at least it made the hours pass faster. By the time I got to the clinic the next morning, I was running on fumes. Laura was already there, sitting in the waiting room. She looked up when I walked in, her eyes filled with something that might have been guilt or fear. I didn't care enough to figure out which. "Hey," she said softly. I didn't respond. I sat down in a chair across the room, arms crossed, staring at the clock on the wall. The nurse called us back a few minutes later, and the process was quick. They swabbed Laura, then me, and told us we'd get the results in about a week. Laura tried to make small talk as we left the clinic, but I cut her off. "Don't talk to me unless it's about the results," I said bluntly. She nodded, her shoulders slumping as she walked away. The waiting was unbearable. Every day felt like an eternity, and my mind kept spiraling through every possible outcome. I talked to my therapist about it, trying to make sense of my emotions, but nothing she said could prepare me for the truth. A week later, the email came. I opened it with trembling hands, my heart pounding so loud I could barely hear myself think. My eyes scanned the words, searching for the answer that would either set me free or shatter me completely. Probability of paternity, 0%. I froze. My hands went limp, and the phone slipped from my grasp, clattering onto the floor. It wasn't mine. The baby wasn't mine. I should have felt relief, but all I felt was rage. Rage at my father, at Laura, at the universe for putting me in this nightmare. I picked up my phone and stared at the email, my vision blurring as hot tears filled my eyes. The next thing I knew, I was calling Laura. She answered after a few rings, her voice cautious. "Adam?" "It's not mine," I said, my voice shaking. There was silence on the other end. Then, a soft, "Oh." "Oh," I snapped. "That's all you have to say? Oh? You destroyed my life, Laura. You and my father. And now, you're carrying his child." "I didn't mean for this to happen," she said, her voice cracking. "Save it," I spat. "I don't care what you meant. You and him, you're both dead to me. Don't ever contact me again." Before she could respond, I hung up and threw my phone onto the couch. I stood there for a moment, my chest heaving, my fists clenched so tight my nails dug into my palms. It wasn't enough. The rage inside me was too much to contain. I grabbed an old chair from the corner of the room and hurled it against the wall. It splintered on impact, the sound of breaking wood echoing through the cabin. I sank to the floor, burying my face in my hands. I didn't know how long I sat there, but by the time I looked up, the room was dark. The next day, I decided to confront my father. I knew it wouldn't fix anything, but I couldn't let him walk away from this without hearing what I had to say. I drove to the hotel where he was staying and pounded on his door until he opened it. His face fell when he saw me. "Adam," he said, his voice wary. "Don't Adam me," I growled, pushing past him into the room. "You're a disgusting, selfish bastard, and I hope you rot in hell for what you've done." He sighed, rubbing the back of his neck. "I know I screwed up, okay? I don't need you to remind me. You think this is about screwing up?" I shouted. You betrayed your own son. You slept with my fiancée, and now you've got her pregnant. Do you have any idea what you've done to me? I never wanted to hurt you, he said, his voice weak. I laughed bitterly. Well, congratulations. You didn't just hurt me. You destroyed me. I don't have a father anymore. You're nothing to me. He looked like he wanted to say something, but I didn't give him the chance. I turned and walked out, slamming the door behind me. As I drove away, I felt a strange sense of finality. I'd said my piece. There was nothing left to do but move on, whatever that looked like. It's been almost a year since everything happened, and I've finally started to feel like myself again. Looking back, it's hard to believe how much my life has changed. I lost my fiancé, my father, and the family I thought I could always count on. But I've gained something I never had before: clarity. After confronting my dad, I cut off all contact with him and Laura for good. My mom and I have been slowly rebuilding our relationship, though it's still a work in progress. She finalized her divorce from my father a few months ago, and while I'm proud of her for standing up for herself, there's still a lot of pain between us. Some wounds take time to heal. I've poured all my energy into creating a new life for myself. The cabin has become more than just a place to live. It's become my sanctuary. I've spent countless hours turning it into a home I can be proud of. I built furniture, landscaped the yard, and even learned how to fix the plumbing. It's not perfect, but it's mine, and that's all that matters. Work has been a saving grace, too. My boss, Carol, has been incredibly supportive, giving me the space I needed to heal while still pushing me to succeed. I've thrown myself into my projects, and I recently got promoted. It's a small win in the grand scheme of things, but it feels like a step in the right direction. As for my social life, it's been a slow rebuild. I've reconnected with a few old friends, and I've started saying yes to things I used to avoid: dinners, outings, even the occasional blind date. I'm not rushing into anything serious, though. Right now, I'm focusing on myself, figuring out who I am outside of the life I used to have. One thing I've learned is that healing isn't linear. There are days when I feel on top of the world, like I can conquer anything, and then there are days when the weight of it all comes crashing back down. But each day, the good ones start to outnumber the bad. A few weeks ago, I got an email from Laura. I debated whether to open it for a long time, but curiosity won out. She wanted to apologize, she said, to explain everything again and tell me how sorry she was. She talked about the baby, about how hard it's been to navigate everything on her own, and how much she regrets what she did. I didn't respond. There was nothing left to say. She made her choices, and I made mine. As for my father, I haven't heard from him since our confrontation at the hotel. Part of me wonders if he's tried to reach out through my mom, but I don't ask, and she doesn't bring him up. Whatever he's doing, wherever he is, I don't care. He's not a part of my life anymore, and he never will be. I've come to realize that healing isn't about forgetting what happened or pretending it didn't hurt. It's about learning to live with the pain, letting it shape you into someone stronger. I don't know what the future holds for me, but I know one thing. I'm not the same person I was a year ago, and that's a good thing. To anyone listening this who's going through something similar, all I can say is, you'll get through it. It won't be easy, and it won't happen overnight, but one day, you'll look back and see how far you've come. Thanks for tuning in. Make sure to subscribe to Cheating Storytelling so you never miss an update on more jaw-dropping real-life stories. Catch you in the next video.